Hello there, I'm Steve from Mac84, and I picked up a computer that was not in my collection. And I want to talk about it, and I want to share some of the pitfalls that you could run into when picking up computers secondhand, especially on online marketplaces and so on and so forth, because not everything is always what it seems. Now you may be thinking, what machine did you not have before, Steven? You have way too many computers. And you're half right. But this thing is, well, something I didn't have. Let's open the box. So any guesses what this computer is? Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff or not. But guess what this is in the comment section for engagement. This is actually one I did not have before. And it might be a surprise to some of you because it's a bog standard Macintosh LC. Now you may be thinking, Steve, how did you not have a Macintosh LC? Okay, well, in my defense, I have an LC2 and an LC3. I have a Quadro 605 and some of the Performa variants and such, but they're all LC2 or higher. They're not the painfully slow original Macintosh LC. And really the only reason why I wanted one of these was for a very unique characteristic of this particular model, is it has a second slot here for another floppy drive. Because one of the configurations here, back when hard drives were super expensive, was to offer this machine with up to 2 floppy drives built in. This let you boot from one disk and run a program from another. Now, this has a blanking slot in there, which we could remove to install another floppy drive, but that's why I kind of wanted one of these things. Now, they are going for a bit crazy prices on eBay, and I paid about $50 plus maybe a little more shipping for this, and I thought that was a fair deal, kind of. Let's open it up and see what I'm talking about. I don't want to have to get up and adjust the camera, so I'm using this poor little Apple IIgs as a stand. The Macintosh LC was released in 1990 and is only one of 2 Macintosh computers to use the Motorola 68020 processor. All the later models used a 68030 processor or later, which was vastly superior to this little thing. Anyway, the LC wasn't meant to be your fastest Mac. It was meant to be a low-cost computer. The LC stood for low-cost color, because these machines were the cheapest you could buy to give you a color Macintosh experience. Sure, the Macintosh SE, the Plus, or the Classic may have been the better buy with a monitor and everything built in, but you didn't get color, and you didn't have some of the expandability that the Macintosh LC offered. Now, the LC is a bit of a slouch, and so is the LC2, but the LC3 and the LC3 Plus are actually pretty darn cool machines. And the Quadro 605 and some of the Performa series aren't half bad either. But today we're going to be talking about this, the original Macintosh LC. So let's open up this thing. The condition of the case is actually in pretty good shape. This is the cleanest I've ever seen. Most of mine have rust spots or scratches or anything. The top has some yellowing. I had to talk to my friend Javier to get some of his retro brighting magic on this. Maybe this will be the first machine I try because there's low risk. I just got the darn thing. But yeah, I mean, it's overall in pretty good shape. I mean, no cracks or blemishes or anything like that. You can see some of the retro brighting rainbow of shades here of different colors of beige. But overall, it's in pretty good shape, externally at least. Now, the seller that sold this to me did note that they did take the hard drive out, they did take the battery out, and this was in as-is condition. They believe the power supply didn't work, and looking at some of the photos, I thought I saw some rust. And I was right. Now, I did see rust here and here in that original photo. That's by the logic board and the power supply. These logic boards, and any of the logic boards of this vintage, are going to have capacitor leakage. That just comes with the territory of these classic Macs. But I'm more concerned about the power supply, because yes, the capacitors will leak in those as well, but this rust is coming from somewhere, and I'm concerned about where it's coming from. Thankfully, it doesn't look like this was battery bombed or anything like that, because the area around the battery looks pretty clean. However, we won't know for sure until we take the parts out. So let's get a different angle on here and see if we could disassemble this thing to reveal any carnage that's underneath. Now, these machines are pretty easy to take apart. Most of the time, the screw holding in the lid is long gone, but if there was one in place, it would have been here. Now, you do want to be very careful because the thing that's holding this together is basically plastic clips, and we all know how fragile Macintosh plastics can be from this time period, unfortunately. However, we have to do it, so we're going to tread slowly here. We do have video memory and memory modules installed here, so that's nice. These are the 4 ROMs. And you can see the hard drive went here, the floppy drive goes here. There's actually a second port here for that floppy drive, so if you did not have a hard drive installed, you could install a second floppy drive. You have your one expansion slot via a PDS slot here, and you have a fan and a speaker and the power supply. So yeah, let's try and remove the goodies from inside of this machine. Now, I've actually never removed this before. On the later Macs, the speaker and the fan are sort of seated a different way, but it looks like there's a clip here and a clip here, and that might just do it. There we go. So that's pretty neat, although it's dusty. There are just 4 contacts on here, and they just touch on the board, and that's how it powers the speaker and the fan. On the later models, there are little cables with sockets that you have to install, but that's pretty neat. So besides the dust, we're in pretty good shape there. The next thing I want to do is remove the power supply, and that's pretty easy too. You just want to get a firm grip on the cable. Sometimes it's easier to remove it than others. And then there are 2 clips on the power supply. They're these little plastic clips. You can see one here, hopefully, and here. And so what we're going to do is just pry those clips away from the power supply, and with your other 2 fingers, just try and like jostle it upwards, because those clips are just holding it down. And we're going to see how nasty this is. Oh, look at that. Yeah, something was not happy here. Oh, that's just great. That's just fantastic. I'm going to assume this power supply is very unhappy, but we'll take a look at that maybe later. But yeah, you can see all the rust and gunk that pooled there. Thankfully, the logic board is kind of lifted up, whereas this has direct contact with this metal plate here. So let's see how the logic board fares. To remove the logic board is similar. There are these 2 plastic tabs right here, and they are easily breakable. So we're gonna see what we can get away with here, because you do have to push them quite a distance in order to clear this because of the design here. So we're just gonna try. Be very careful here. Oh wow, I got it. That was a shocker. All right, let's see how bad this thing is underneath. Let me unplug the floppy cable here so I could actually flip the board. All right, 3, 2, 1. Oh, hey, that's clean. Okay, good. That was what I was most worried about. The logic board is clean on the bottom. At the top, I could see capacitor leakage and some green on the chips. Oh, that's great. But yeah, I mean, it's normal logic board issues that we have to deal with. But the bottom there, as you could see where the logic board was, is in good shape. So it's dusty, and there's a hint of rust running from here into the back plane here where that metal sort of curved up by the connectors there. But overall, not in terrible shape. It is dusty, but yeah, I'm curious how this power supply and logic board will clean up. But that's not terribly bad. I mean, I've seen much, much worse. And we could probably clean most of that off. And if not, this piece of metal, you don't really need it. You can just rip it out. I'm sure everyone's going to yell at me, no, it's needed because the FCC and grounding and this and... Yeah, probably not. You're good. So, yeah, nice. Let's take a look at this power supply. Now, I'm usually the one to take these apart at my streaming desk where I have the microscope and everything, but I'm going to just take it apart here and just see how bad it is. And yeah, the rubber handle of this screwdriver is shedding, so you can ignore those little bits everywhere. All right. Does that want to give? Maybe. Oh, we still got one over here. Now, many different manufacturers made these power supplies. This one is made by TDK, Aztec, GE, and many others made Macintosh power supplies, Sony, etc. The LC series lasted in one form or another for quite a while, so there are quite a few different power supplies that you could find for these machines. Generally speaking, they're all compatible with each other, and they all have different capacitors, which just makes things extra annoying when you're trying to figure out which capacitor goes with which model, etc. Thankfully, Bruce of Brankus Creations has a recapamac.com website, and I have some recapping guides on mac84.net that include some of the LC power supplies. So hopefully, between those 2 sites and places like Tinker Different, you should be able to find the replacement capacitors for your Mac. All right, this smells bad already. It's always a good sign. Did you ever have a Macintosh LC? Let me know in the comments section. These machines were always of interest to me just because they were so small and compact. Oh yeah, that looks terrible. Okay, yeah, so it might be a little bit hard to see on camera, but leaking capacitors all over here, and you can actually see it on the side of the board. Probably extremely hard to see on camera. I'm not zoomed in or anything, but it's like all brown and yucky. And yeah, so this is going to be fun. I don't know if I have all the caps for these, so what I'll probably just do is temporarily use a different power supply and just see if the logic board works. We're going to have to recap both the power supply and the logic board. There's no question about that. But I just want to see what condition this thing is and if it actually will kind of work with some donor parts. But yeah, unfortunately, it's not just the logic board you got to worry about with these old Macintosh computers. It's the power supplies too, especially on the Macintosh 2 series and the LCs. There's just something about them that like to go. Not to mention the compact Macs. I mean, there's just so much to love about these machines. All the repair opportunities and so on. Well, I'm going to try and sort of get this together without getting more of that forbidden soap on me, but I mean, we'll have to remove it anyway, so I'm just yeah, that's just good for now. Now let's take a look at the logic board for a bit. I probably will end up looking at this under the microscope because right here, you might be able to just see it when I tilt it. There's some not shiny bits on this chip. Those legs are darkened and green and blech. And that's corrosion. These capacitors, we like to call these the capacitor forest because they're just so densely packed. Those love to leak, and when they leak, they mess with this chip. And that's the sound chip, and those are getting harder and harder to find. So you need a sound chip for a lot of Macintosh computers just to get the thing to operate correctly. So hopefully we could just clean this up and we should be good to go. This machine does not have too many capacitors on there. We have that group here, and we have 3 on the side here. I have all of these in stock, but that'll probably take me an hour or 2 to get all tidied up. So we'll probably do that off camera or in a live stream sometime. But I am curious if I do clean this up just with some isopropyl alcohol, if we can get this thing to spring to life. Now, I always tell anybody that's new to this sort of stuff, cleaning a board with just isopropyl alcohol and leaving the original caps on there is kind of like fixing your flat tire with just putting some air in it. It's not really going to fix the root cause of the problem, which is a punctured tire. And in this case, these capacitors are well past their prime. They are leaking, they are not within spec, and they're just not working the way they were designed to. So the power flow on this board is not exactly doing what it was supposed to be doing from the factory. So if we do clean this up with some isopropyl alcohol, there is a chance that it can spring to life and it will kind of work. You might not get sound or you might have some wonky issues, but it will prove that the logic board kind of works. But the next step would be is to remove the capacitors and replace them. And you want to make sure you clean those areas, because I've seen some boards sent to me for repair where, yeah, they were recapped, but the person did not clean the area at all. And unfortunately, that meant I had to remove all the capacitors, even though they were pretty new, scrub the heck out of everything, clean it up, and put new caps back on. So you don't want to skip that step. Cleaning is essential. I briefly thought about cleaning this off with just some isopropyl alcohol and turning it on, but looking at some of these chips, I was very hesitant to do that. With the amount of corrosive material on this board, I wanted to make sure it was clean before I turned it on. I didn't want to risk frying the sound chip or anything else. It just so happened that my good friend Ron from Ron's Computer Videos was doing a live stream with friends, so I decided to hop on and repair this logic board during that stream. Now, although there was a lot of corrosion and grime on this board, it wasn't too bad. I didn't really find any broken traces, and the sound chip actually cleaned up pretty good. Okay, so after a recap, this thing's actually looking pretty good. There was a lot of grime under some of these chips and just all around that sound chip. So I'm very curious if this thing is going to spring to life or not. I did try and neutralize some of the rust here. I didn't do a good job. I'm going to have to come back to do that on the board and on the case. But I'm curious if this works. So let's pop it in the case. I have a known working power supply because the one that came out of here is not going to be working anytime soon. And we'll test it out. But for now, we're just going to keep the one floppy drive that came with the machine and I'm going to use my blue SCSI here, which is an external DB25 model, to try and boot this thing up. So if this thing has some life, it should start up. So let's try that. Okay, let's see if anything blows up in 3, 2, 1. Fan. Hey, we got chime. Excellent. Awesome. We got our video scaler thingy, which may or may not like... Oh, there we go. We got video. Get the mouse over here. There it goes. Welcome to Macintosh. Hey! That's awesome. I'm very glad that the sound worked because I was very worried about that sound chip. It still doesn't look the best, but we'll put this through the ultrasonic cleaner and it'll clean up anything that I missed manually. But oh, goodness. All right, so let's see how much memory we have here. I don't know if you can see that on camera. Got 4 megs. Okay, so we're running system 7.1, and it looks like I also have system 6, system 7, 0, 1, etc. So, hey, that's pretty cool. This system did not come with a hard drive, so we're just stuck with the floppy drives, and I could use that blue SCSI externally. But there are some very creative people who have made brackets to hold an internal blue SCSI right here on the logic board. So I could, take a little bit of a longer SCSI cable and route that here, so I could have 2 floppy drives and still have a hard drive. Whereas the old hard drives were so big you couldn't do that. But I think that's what I want to do with this machine. I think that would be a lot of fun. Now that we know the system works, I want to test the floppy drives. Now this one is the one that came with the machine, but I do have a second one that was given to me from an e-wasted Macintosh LC where the logic board was just destroyed. So I'm going to use this, and I don't have the logic board seated 100%, and I'm not going to seat the floppy drive either because I still want to clean this out a bit. But at least we'll be able to see if the floppy drives function. They probably need some sort of attention. These are the 1.4 meg drives. So we have both floppy drives plugged in and our blue SCSI. Let's turn it back on. I love that chime. So I have a floppy here. Let's test the first drive. And nothing. Let's try ejecting that manually and trying again. Make sure everything's plugged in. That's not happy. Well, let's try the other floppy drive. Okay, so that did read the disk. So we have a Norton startup disk here. So let's eject that. Okay, it's not ejecting. That probably needs some heavy-duty cleaning. I am concerned that this one isn't working, but I guess we'll just have to open up each drive and take a quick look to see if we could clean anything up. Okay, we have 2 floppy drives here. This is the one that came with the machine. This is the one I pulled from another machine. You notice that the mounting hardware is slightly different on these models. This one came from an LC2, and these larger screws that protrude there are actually used by the plastic to hold those in. Let's take the cover off of this drive first and see what we're dealing with here. Could just be dust, it could just be dried up grease. Hopefully it's nothing more than that. Okay, this is a Sony floppy drive, and there's quite a bit of dust in there, so let's try and clean that out a bit. Well, I've cleaned the drive a bit. I think I have to re-grease a few areas, but I want to see what progress I made. So I'm just putting this in temporarily using a USB floppy drive just so none of the metal on the bottom contacts the metal on the machine. And I just want to see if this has improved in any way. Oh, well, it made a noise, so maybe it was jammed. All right, so let's insert the disk and see if it shows up. Looks like it's reading. Hey, look at that. It shows up on the desktop. Now, the big trick here is going to see if it could actually eject the disk. Let's see. Hey, look at that. It actually ejected. Perfect. All right, so we'll clean this up a little bit and try the next drive. Oh, gosh, yeah, that's worse than the last one. I mean, just look how much dust is in this thing. I'm surprised this drive worked at all. Oh, it's just, ugh, all in here. Every little crevice. Look at that. We haven't even been inside yet. Look at how disgusting this Q-tip is. Another cotton swab here. Gently clean this out. I'm gonna have to take this thing apart. Ugh. Now this floppy drive was the one I salvaged from a broken machine, and it did work, but I did clean it up a bit. Let's see if it'll actually eject, because I don't think it was happy about doing that last time. All right, well, we didn't break it because it still reads the disk, so that's good. Let's try and eject it. Okay, it doesn't eject it. The motor might have a bad gear, or the motor may be bad. So that's something I'm going to have to look into. So here's the eject motor, and you can see that this little gear is very much yellowed. And we do have some replacement gears here. And that should fit in this drive just fine. But I'm not sure if it's the gear that's causing the problem or just dried up grease and dust. Because this will spin. Sorry, it's going out of focus here. But this will spin. But this is where the motor is. So I'm going to take this out. And I'm just going to play around with this a little bit to see if I can get any of this moving. Yeah. And maybe that'll do the trick. That looks a little bit better, so we'll see if that makes any difference. Now, you do want to make sure when you reinstall these, whether it be a 1.4 meg drive or an 800K drive, that this peg is toward the top. And if you can't move that, take out some of the gears and spin it manually. But this is how it ejects. It pushes against the metal. And if that's in the wrong spot, it's going to get all discombobulated. Well, let's test that out again. So let's turn the machine on. Put a disc in here. Hey, it worked! How about that? I just held down the mouse button on boot up and it ejected the disc. That's fantastic. It still reads the disc. Now let's eject it again. Oh, that's excellent. Woohoo! All right, we have our working LC logic board here. And we did find a way to put in the second floppy drive. The trick is that I thought that the style of shield or case or whatever you want to call it that is on the floppy drive from the Mac LC that I took this drive out of, well, it doesn't exactly fit here. And that's because the LC model has these little clips here, whereas like the LC2 and the LC3 have a different set of clips which actually have these grooves where a fatter screw screwed into the floppy drive would fit, and it actually is a pretty ingenious solution, and you don't have to bend the plastic tabs as much, whereas the original LC doesn't have that. So what I did was I just sort of 3D printed a little rail that goes on the side of the floppy drive to sort of mimic how that would sit in, and it's not perfect, but you know what? It's secure. So we're just going to keep that for now, and I'll improve upon that when I get around to it. So now I want to remove the slot here, and that's for the second floppy drive. Now, as you can see, if you look on the back of this thing, there actually is a cutout there, and you just have to remove this metal piece. So that's what we're going to do carefully, and we should just be able to free that spot open, and hopefully it'll line up correctly. So there are these little metal tabs. I'm just going to pry that up gently, and oh, that just comes out, and there's this little plastic thing. And that comes out too. Excellent. So in theory, I should just be able to slide this over and put this like this. And if everything lines up, there we go. We have a lovely Macintosh LC with 2 floppy drives. Okay, so this thing is all buttoned up. Let's see if those dual floppy drives work. We're going to be booting off of a blue SCSI, and let's turn this thing on. I'm going to look at my preview monitor here because I can't see this screen. Hopefully, there it goes. It turns on. Excellent. So this has a few copies of the system software on it, so it should just boot up into system 7 or 6 or something like that. All right, we're on the desktop here, and let me try and navigate to the Apple menu. And we have 4 megabytes of memory. Well, that's plenty for what we need today. So let's test the first floppy drive here. Hopefully this disk works. Ah, there it goes. Excellent. All right, and let's test the second disk drive. Hey, that worked too. Excellent. All right, now the big test. Make sure that they still eject after we fussed around with them trying to clean them up. All right, and this second one here. Excellent. All right, well, that's pretty much what I wanted out of this machine. I wanted to install 2 floppy drives in it for no particular reason, just because I could. And since we have a blue SCSI plugged into the back and we could also install one internally, I could have the power of 2 floppy drives and a hard drive in a little Macintosh LC. Well, how about that? For about 50 bucks, I have a working Macintosh LC. We're able to clean up the logic board, put in a replacement power supply temporarily, and I have a second floppy drive in there, which is a lot of fun. So this thing actually cleaned up quite nice. I'm not done with it yet. I do want to do a better deep cleaning of this. I want to ultrasonically clean the logic board. I want to see if I could fix that original power supply. If not, I'll get a replacement. And I do want to clean up the front of this and maybe do some retro brighting to it, because it is looking a little bit bleh, especially on the front where there's all this grime where people touched it over the years. But it works, which is pretty good, because a lot of these machines are sold as is, and if the person that gets that machine is not really willing to put in the time and energy to fix it, they'll probably just end up in e-waste. So although I'm not going to go crazy with upgrades like my friend Sean from Action Retro, I do have a few plans, so I'm hoping that you'll stick around and make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can see what I do with this machine next. But with this machine up and running, I think we're going to pause there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like these sorts of things, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video. You could also follow me on social media, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you could do so as well. But that's about it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you right here next time on Mac 84.